Okay, and we are live. I'm going to post this to our Gitter channel. Okay, and we are live. And mute the audio feed so I don't hear myself. Post this. Minor details. Okay. Great. So yeah, I'll kick us off. So I'm Tony. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. Been working on the WebHint project for around a year, maybe a little over a year now. And I've been doing a fair amount of work specifically on the browser extension lately that we've been working on. So Mike will definitely be chatting here in the near future. And that about wraps it up for me.
Cool. I'll go next. I'm Rachel. I'm a PM for DevTools at Microsoft, and I'm fairly new. Just been kind of working on WebHint for the past month or so. So it's nice to see everyone again and see some new faces as well.
I can go next. I'm Utsav. I'm a software engineer. Been at Microsoft for I think about 6 years now. Mostly worked on engineering systems. Recently joined WebHint. It's been about 8 months or 9 months.
I'll go. My name is Stephanie. I'm a PM on the Edge ecosystem team, and I'm the designer for WebHint.
Oh, I can go. This is. Do you want to go?
You have to speak up a little bit, Harold. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, gosh, move closer. So yeah, I'm Harold, product manager on developer experience / DevTools at Firefox. Working with WebHint for half a year now, and was involved since the beginning, since its inception, in discussions how it should be a cross-browser project.
I'm David. I'm a software engineer in Plain Concepts, and I've been working on WebHint since the beginning. And I participate in almost every part of the project: the CLI, the website, the online scanner.
Yeah, basically David knows everything, right?
More or less.
That's something to keep in mind. I'm Mike. I'm from Mozilla DevTools. Been doing it for, since early Firebug days. So, I'll be working on styling WebHint to basically our Firefox quantum theme. So, yeah.
Welcome, Mike. It's nice to have you. I would say, since given the attendance here, would you like to shift gears and actually kind of start the conversation chatting about styling WebHint for looking native in Firefox a bit first, Harold and Mike?
Yeah. I think from my side, we have some workers from Victoria. I think since then the project has shifted a bit, so we'll check in with Victoria on our side and just get a list of her going through the current designs that are being applied and picking probably the top design adaptations that we need to do to get it feel more Firefox, feel more integrated. I have an open bug that I will nudge on the icon picking up the proper dark light theme for DevTools, which otherwise would look weird in dark themes or light themes. So whatever we pick, it will makes it awkward. So I think that's kind of. I'm sure Mike already has ramped up. We only had a discussion this week on him helping.
Yeah. Like Harold said, we need to wait for the mock-ups, which we have some, but they're still coming along. I do have a couple of pretty serious bugs to fix before I start work on this. But it's just really getting to know kind of what you've all been doing, and from what I can make It seems that it's a really cool plugin. I'm quite excited to be working on it actually. So yeah.
Yeah, we did look at the CSP issue as one potential thing that we can pick up, because that's our fault or Firefox's fault, but we take all the blame. But it is, we can make it work better and make it fall back nicer. So
okay, so you were thinking of picking up like adding a workaround to WebHint then? Is that what you were
yes,
to do, to detect the scenario and give a better error message?
Yeah, we have the issue on our side. Hopefully that will eventually get fixed, but I checked with the security team. It's not on their immediate roadmap. So we'll take at least another quarter for them to pick it up, presumably. Yeah. And even if it gets picked up and fixed, it will probably take still a while to change. So
still at least 6 weeks before it goes out, and then the update cycle. And it's always the train that takes a little while.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, and I know that I think we were wanting, like Stephanie and I were probably wanting to chat with Victoria as well, just to clarify and finalize a few points of where we think we could drive a little additional consistency between the two designs. We've been making some changes already to the Fluent side of the design that we're using current default theme. I know we've brought icons in place where Victoria had added icons for the Firefox, the Photon design as well. And so we're trying to see places where it makes sense. Obviously, there's going to be some that are going to be different, and that's fine. And we'll definitely have different colors and stuff between the themes. But if we can find places where it makes sense within both design systems to align even closer, I think that's awesome too.
Yeah. I think this is the goal. I don't want our designs to necessarily improve upon yours, just and then we maintain a difference. So where it makes sense, improvements in design, they probably work across both places. And then it's mostly about like colors and maybe changing icons and padding, whatever slightly design system differences we have.
Yeah, and then the input styling I know is one significant one. And that was one piece that we did do early in the code base. So we started. It's not 100% complete for every single interaction scenario, but we did start styling like the radio buttons and checkboxes, buttons and input fields to align with the Photon design guidelines.
Okay, I think it's also interesting how those design guidelines get pretty close to what Chrome has as well, right? So it's kind of a side benefit.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have this moving forward. So thank you.
Great. I think from a coordination perspective with Victoria, I think it's easiest to usually preference, like we have most of our discussions about UX in bugs, just to kind of keep it async and everybody be able to participate if we need to set a meeting to talk in general. But I think it's useful to just have the things that currently between you and Stephanie that are up in the air on like things where the design might need more alignment or anything else, just in the bug best.
Okay. And Mike, I was also going to let you know if there's anything specific you need from us, quick responses. A few of us are paying pretty close attention to our Gitter channel that we have linked off of the homepage of our repo. That's where we lately have been doing more coordination. We even have a Firefox sub channel there for kind of that topic specific discussion as well, so we can pull people in.
So that's the easiest way to contact you. And how are we distributed globally? You're obviously in the States.
Yes. So I think most people are on the West Coast. I'm actually in the Midwest. I'm in Iowa. I work from home.
Okay, perfect. That's all I need to know.
Cool. Well, with that, I think I'll shift gears and we can talk a little bit about our most recent sprint. And Harold and Mike, you're welcome to stay on and discuss with us. But if you feel you've got other things you want to reclaim time for, we won't take offense. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen and our planning board. Okay, so we've actually got quite a few things right now that we're still wrapping up PR reviews on, but we're in a pretty good state for this sprint. This one wasn't as heavily focused on the browser extension. We took a little bit more time overall to continue work on refining our online service, where we've been working for the past few sprints, migrating to a serverless architecture to make it easier to scale out. This is what powers the scans that you run at the webhint.io website. And then we have also done some work on telemetry. So that's something we've got in place for the browser extension, but we also have an editor extension for VS Code that's also been in preview for a while. And so we took some time to get back to that this sprint. That's this particular work item. And specifically with the telemetry, I think it's a good opportunity to reiterate kind of what we're trying to gather here, which is more aggregate information to give us an idea of which hints are triggering more often and which ones people are acting upon. So which ones people are finding more useful. So we can kind of triage, in a sense, the hints themselves. And to do that, both the VS Code extension and the browser extension are maintaining kind of a local comparison of scans, and all we're really reporting as part of the telemetry are the hint IDs and whether they passed, failed, fixed, or are in the process of being fixed. It's a fixing status, which just means that the number of failures for that hint is reduced between the previous run. We don't attach session IDs or anything to it, so it's all just aggregate data. Actually, Harold, one of the other pieces related to this, I'd be curious to get your input on. Oh, I think we lost Harold. He was there a second ago. Well, if he does come back, I can ask him again, but I'll share here for now. One of the things that we are discussing a bit is whether the telemetry should be more of an opt-in or opt-out experience. We're currently inconsistent between some of our different targets. The CLI is currently opt-in. And so I've mocked the VS Code extension telemetry to be opt-in as well. However, looking at a lot of other extensions in the ecosystem, opt-out seems to be more of the common pattern I'm seeing, where, like, especially in VS Code, there's a VS Code setting the extension will expose to opt out of telemetry. And then a number of extensions will respect the VS Code wide telemetry setting as well, so that if you opt out for all telemetry for VS Code, they'll stop sending telemetry as well. And so it could make a lot of sense for us to tie in there. But I think it's an interesting discussion for us to continue to have around user expectations, even though we're doing, aggregate anonymous collection. There's pros and cons to both of whether we're doing an opt-in or opt-out approach. And we don't have to decide anything around that here today, but I think it's a good thing for all of us to be thinking about so that we can kind of move that toward consistency between the different endpoints in the future. Utsav, can I pick on you for a little bit to talk about the updates to the online service?
Sure. We basically...
I was going to say, is there a particular one of the issues that'd be a good one to bring up?
I don't know if they're granular enough, but basically we still had a dependency on the hint packages. So, I mean, you did some work to remove some stuff to utils, and then David did a bunch of work to put our categories into JSON files. So that helped us remove dependency on hint. So that was a big one. And we had a bunch of discussions around like some dashboards and stuff like that we still need to talk about. But other than that, we finished converting all of our services that we could convert to Azure Functions. We got rid of backup service because we are now using Cosmos instead of Mongo, and that has backups automatically. And then the only one that is still up in the air is the workers that I don't think are suitable for conversion to functions, but we can look into see if we have some like dynamically scaling options in the future. But so right now they're all, I've tested them locally, still using the workers that have been deployed. So I'm going to deploy these up to staging and kind of let it run through all the way from the website to the workers. And then also we have a script that can fire in 10,000, 20,000 URLs just to bombard them with scans to see how well it fares out.
Okay, and just to clarify for everyone, like part of the effort to remove like the direct dependencies on hint is because we're trying to split these into smaller microservices as part of the serverless conversion. So we'd like to have that the original online service was a lot more tightly integrated. And so we're trying to get them to be more isolated components with a better clearly defined interface between them and not bring in as many dependencies.
Yep.
Cool. Let's see, other changes. Let's see, David, you did some work to migrate tests in the serverless refactor as well?
Yep, refactor and migrate the test.
Okay. And then there was another update to the VS Code extension where so for the VS Code extension, we actually use this installed hint package in the project, but if none is available, we prompt to offer to install it. We had local and global install options. We really recommend that people use the install the project option, and so we're updated to remove the global option from the prompt for the VS Code extension. David also created a configuration all, which is another piece to help the online service refactor. This basically gives us one configuration that pulls in all of our different sub-package dependencies so that when we need to, David, I'm forgetting at the moment, you'll have to refresh my memory. Which part of the service are we pulling this in for specifically?
This one is to the serverless, so we can generate the JSON with all the hints and categories.
Yes. Okay, yeah, that's generating the JSON file that we can then pass to the other components so they can have knowledge of which hints were active within the scan.
Yeah, it's also for the future to use it in the website. But
okay.
For now, it's in the serverless.
All right, thank you. A few different bug fixes and improvements. Here we have Jaspreet, who's an open source contributor who's participating with us for a few weeks as part of the Pesto program, which we got connected to through the JS Foundation. And as part of setting up his initial stack, he had a different default OS language than we did. And it highlighted that one of our tests in the test suite had accidentally taken a dependency on the language of the current operating system and therefore was failing. So we went in and we fixed how the options were being picked up for that test case. And he was kind enough to submit a PR with the fix. He's also working on a new hint right now to help with a scenario that Anton had forwarded from Twitter, where people have been surprised that style elements underneath inline SVG elements are not scoped. And so this is one that it kind of fits in the whole pitfall category of hints that we've been building out, where these are things that work consistently everywhere in the web platform, but aren't necessarily what people expect as they're coming around to work with web content for the first time. And we think that's a really useful category of things to continue to expand upon. And so I'm excited to have him doing some work there. That'll be more into next sprint, but I wanted to call it out since I know he started work. We had a customer reported bug in the VS Code extension this sprint where with the TS lint extension installed, we are actually running validation against TS config schema files that weren't even in the project. I traced that down to what appears to be a bug in the VS Code server hosting layer, and I've opened a bug over there on their GitHub repo. I haven't received feedback yet on it. But in the meantime, I scoped the search for tsconfig JSON files to not include tsconfig.schema.json, so that we would exclude these and not raise errors in this case. There was also kind of affecting the VS Code extension was a reference in its default configuration to the old Axe hint. So last sprint, we did work to more deeply integrate Axe Core, which is the open source engine that we're sharing with a number of other projects to do our accessibility tests. Before, we had treated it as one hint within the entire project, and now we have a hint kind of per subcategory in Axe. So it's a split about 14 ways. This was actually feedback from Harold originally, to kind of get that more deeply integrated and feel more equal to the other hints within the project. But we had one old configuration that was still referencing the old one, so that got cleaned up. And similarly, kind of along similar lines, there was one of our other configurations that didn't have our JavaScript parser enabled, so it wasn't running certain hints. This was affecting the CLI version of WebHint. So specifically hints like one that we checked for create element SVG, where it's another pitfalls hint where we check to see if you're calling create element, not the NS version, and trying to create an SVG element, which is just going to happily pass and give you an element that won't render because it'll be in the HTML namespace. And so that one wasn't running there, so now we have it enabled. And along with that, so we published updates to all the NPM packages, so that's all live. Yeah, there are a couple other cleanups on just package references. Let's see, we wrapped up some other pieces of localization work. So we are not localized yet. We're still only English at the moment, but we've been doing work over the past few sprints to make everything localizable. And so David finished up work on our HTML formatter for results, which is what's used by the WebHint IO scanner to display results on the website. And so connecting all of our localized strings through that path so that we'll be able to, once we have additional localizations, actually use the language of a visitor to the website to decide what language to localize to in the scan results. And I think that covers most of what was in that sprint. A few things we still have sitting up, a couple other bug fixes. There was a cleanup to another piece of telemetry for user configs in the CLI. And then one piece, actually, this one's a good one to talk about. Because Rachel, I just tagged you in another issue related to this morning. So for third-party packages for the CLI, we have a name format. So all of our own are published under the hint scope on NPM. And then for third-party packages, we required them to start with webhint dash hint dash the name of the hint. But this didn't allow for someone to use their own scope in order to publish a package they wanted to be able to use with webhint. And the way we were doing the search for that, it was easy to fill in trailing parts of package name, but a little bit more difficult to infer any possible scope. And this mattered because for our config files, which I was hoping maybe I can find this issue real quick. Let's see. Yeah, this is the one. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So in our config files today, the hint.rc, we actually only use a part of the package name. So when you're specifying what connector you're going to use, which configuration you might be extending, and what hints are active. For first-party hints, or ones following that our existing naming convention, you just specify kind of the unique part of the name. So the whole package could be something like hint hint button type, and you just specify button type. But when it came to a scoped package name, we needed to allow specifying the full package name here. And that's what this PR is really enabling. We'll be doing more review on that today. And then this issue here is opened up to kind of discuss, well, would it be more consistent or easier to understand for users editing HintRC files for the first time if we just always recommended using full package names instead of asking them to know which part of the package name is special? And so we're having some discussion here, and I think we'll want to do a little additional research to kind of try to land on the right answer there. We support both once this PR is in, with the exception of third-party scope package names, which must be fully qualified. And then, yeah, David's finishing up a piece for, so this is one piece we're doing on the browser extension for the sprint. This is a good one. So we have the feedback link that's in the upper right corner. And we had in the past linked off to a template that asked for a bunch of additional information around like what browser you're running, operating system version, what was your configuration that you ran with. And so we know a lot of that when you click the link, and GitHub gives us the ability to provide the body of a feedback issue as a query string param. And so what David's doing in this change is taking our template and taking the data from the local state and filling it out when someone clicks the feedback link. So all of that's pre-populated and users only have to provide any additional text that they need to add. They don't have to go through the additional work of gathering that kind of version data from Webhint or omitting it in the case that they didn't bother. So it'll help us make it easier to give feedback and help us get higher quality feedback through the browser extension. Last thing we were looking at this sprint, we had another team in Microsoft do some work on a CI extension for Azure pipelines, and we're hoping that we might be able to get that contributed to the Webhint.io organization on GitHub here soon. I'm still waiting to hear back on that. And so we started also looking at some other CI systems for whether they had similar things and what we might be able to do there. Rachel, this is something you and I should probably follow up on, but at least spent some time yesterday looking at Travis and Circle. They don't seem to have anything as integrated as Azure Pipelines does, because they don't have as visual of an editing experience. They tend to operate mostly off of text configuration files. The Circle CI does have the concept of orbs, which can package configurations together. They still have to be kind of included through a text configuration file. And I think the discussion point for us before we go any further is whether doing something like an orb would simplify things much versus documenting how to just list the CLI command in that same configuration file. So this may turn into less of a creating an extension and more of, for some of these systems, provide clear documentation on how to reference the CLI. And
yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Like, just having it documented is probably, it would still be super helpful.
Okay, awesome. So that's where that kind of came out. I didn't actually move this out of the backlog, but I was looking into this particular item yesterday. Cool, and then we just have one bug that we haven't gotten around to yet that we put in the backlog. But overall, that's quite a bit of work pulled together this sprint. I'm expecting most things in the review column will close out today or by early Monday. And so I think that puts us in a pretty good state. The interesting question then is ideas for next sprint. So I was telling David yesterday, I didn't have a lot personally that I was super focused on. I think, we may have an opportunity, depending on timing, to use part of this next sprint to help with the Firefox design. It just kind of depends on where things are there. Obviously, Mike, if there are any PRs or anything you start, we'll we'll make sure that we provide resources to assist with any questions you have. And then in general, let me clear these filters. I've been trying to take the overall backlog categories that we have. I've added a few more groupings, so we now have sections for the VS Code extension and browser extension as well. And I've been trying to, as I go through, sort things to the top that I think are things we might want to consider sooner rather than later. But I haven't put together a specific plan of what I think might be good for next sprint. I'm curious if everyone would like to maybe have a little discussion on that now, or if we'd like to table that and discuss early next week. Rachel, what do you think?
I'd say let's chat about it now if there are things that are standing out to folks.
Okay. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to do one quick tweak, and I'm going to give us a new milestone that we can start dropping stuff into. And that's going to start at the beginning of the week, and then we kind of carry it through 2 weeks. I can get back to the board. And okay, so since let's see. Oh, Stephanie, I'm sorry. I was filtered to the milestone. You had a couple of things in the backlog that we hadn't gotten tagged with the milestone.
That's for this next sprint.
That's for this next sprint. Okay, perfect.
And I know one thing, Tony, we had talked about maybe a couple of days ago was making some updates to the site to actually update, the new browser extension and some things that are in the VS Code extension, which aren't advertised sort of on the main landing page. Did you create an issue for that, or was that did I fall down on the job?
I think I wouldn't place blame there. I think it just fell between the cracks there between us, but let's go ahead and create one now. So yeah, let me actually, I should double check, make sure. I think we had one for listing at least the VS Code extension. Let me double check. The website didn't have anything sitting. Yeah, show the VS Code somewhere. This is a relatively older issue that we've been sitting on. It might be a good one to bring into the backlog. Rachel, you were thinking you could spend some time kind of working on that documentation this sprint?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was a couple of things. It's making sure the VS Code extension and the browser extension are sort of on the main landing page. We had talked about maybe making some updates to the copy on that main page. And then there's also some documentation pages, sort of on the inner navigation that could use some love as well. I would probably split those out into 2 separate issues at least.
Yeah, and this one's, we can rename, and I don't know exactly how we want to split it. Whether we want to kind of have one issue for filling out stuff for the VS Code extension and one issue for filling out stuff for the browser extension, and we can kind of use that as filling out the sub information for each of those, which we know we need to do. And then we could potentially do a third to track updating kind of the homepage and stuff to list them, which is, I think, more along the lines of the question, at least, that we had asked in this issue. You're on mute. Rachel, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. That's weird. My spacebar just stopped working. Stephanie, were you the one that created the images for the landing page?
So no, Anton was working with someone, I think, at Plain Concepts. David, correct me if I'm wrong. So we might want to see.
Yeah, I think we did some of the arts of the images. Yeah.
You're talking specifically about these graphics?
Those graphics, yeah.
Yeah, that was what, Mike Bonales, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Although, actually, if you scroll up, the other actually, as I was thinking about these more generic ones, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I have to like reimagine it altogether because now if we're adding a VS Code extension and browser extension, like that, it's obviously like getting more visually complex. But there's like the CLI, the online scanner, but we'd also want to add like extension and VS Code extension, browser extension, potentially at that level. But yeah, it almost feels like at this point, it may even need a little bit more of a design reimagining so that it's not, just to make sure the hierarchy is clear and everything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how many cycles you have right now, Stephanie. Definitely something we'd want your input on.
Yeah, for sure. And just like real quick, like off the top of my head, maybe we don't even need to, maybe we can remove the link, both those links there at the top level with those illustrations, because I think when we had redesigned this, Anton wanted to like really draw attention to those two things. So maybe if we're trying to get people to use the extension and the browser and VS Code extensions, maybe we just swap those out, because we do link to the scanner up above and even like a little bit further down on the homepage.
We have the inline experience there as well.
I think one other thing we had kind of talked about is like with this webpage, it would be really great now that there's a sort of a family of, WebHint items, like kind of illustrating to the user where they fit into the development process, right? Like, oh, here's a scanner if you just want to see what it does. Here's a CLI for the, like here's a VS Code extension for when you're actually developing in your IDE. Here's a browser extension for when you're testing, and like showing it sort of as a progression so that the user understands like when they might use these different tools, and to understand that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they're part of like a developer's full end-to-end experience. And then talking about the CLI in terms of like, integrated testing and pipelines and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice to have that visual reference, but also to distinguish like the steps or the parts of the developer's sort of process.
Okay. I was wondering, perhaps this is something where, and like, jump in and correct me if I'm off base here, but where you could kind of help put together maybe sort of a recommended structure for how you'd like to present the information, and then Stephanie can help figure out how we can make that look good.
Yeah, sounds great.
That sound good to you, Stephanie?
Yeah. Sorry, am I on? Nope. Yeah, that sounds good. And then for illustrations, I think it'd be great if we could get one for a browser extension and one for VS Code. So, Rachel, I can work with you to find out, or to David, I'll loop you into, because I don't know how Anton was getting those illustrations done, but it'd be great to get 2 more of those.
Yeah, I hear he responds to questions even though he's on leave, so maybe we can still get an answer.
I'll ping Anton. He's on WhatsApp far too often.
Yes. I feel, Mike, I should offer you a little bit of context since Anton's not here today, but Anton's another person who's been with the project since the beginning. He helped start it. He's just on paternity leave right now, so that's why he's not with us today. But you'll definitely get an opportunity to meet him in the future.
I see. Great.
Okay, so I don't have to make you all watch me kind of shred this up, but I'm just going to add a note to split this into a few issues. And then I'll get this cleaned up into a couple issues so that we can divvy up the work this sprint. So we've got homepage updates, and then
Yeah, the docs.
Documentation, homepage updates and documentation updates for both the VS Code and browser extensions.
Can I also just make a note that we'll probably want to rethink the main menu in the header, since right now it just links to like Scanner and Docs.
Yeah, good call.
Yes, good call. Cool. Yeah, I'll just save us time by not making the whole group like watch me struggle with ZenHub to get that all sorted out. Okay, so yeah, that was a good one. Another thing that come to my attention, I think is interesting to come into this sprint is we had a customer request for showing the color contrast ratio for axe hints. And what's interesting here is we actually already have this information from axe, we're just not exposing it. I don't know if it ends up making them more sense to tack it on to the message we already have, or if this is something where we may want to have some sort of secondary message styling that we present in different contexts for additional information. But there, at least with Axe, there's some very useful information on a number of the reports that we get that we should surface to help people better understand exactly what needs to be changed.
Adding to this, I think talking for Irish, that's something they disabled in Axe for Lighthouse because it's the most expensive to check.
Sorry, Harold. So the color contrast one is disabled in Axe where?
It's using right, yeah, to the input. The X audit in Lighthouse for color contrast is disabled because it's too expensive.
Yeah, and we've actually, with the latest version of Axe, we've been having a lot better luck with that. I was actually just at the end of the sprint closing out one of the perf issues we had because with updating to Axe 3.3 and with the other changes we've made to some of our other perf intensive hints like the compat API hint, we had brought the time to execute on different pages down dramatically. So youtube.com was one of the worst. The scan would fully time out, which it had a 3-minute timeout before. With the early updates to Axe, it was finishing in around 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And with everything fully up to date now, it's finishing in about 40 seconds. And it's the longest scan that I've found so far running on different pages. Most everything else now is finishing in under 10 when I visit various different pages. And that's with color contrast enabled.
Oh, great. Wow.
So it seems they've made some really great strides on making that more efficient. But thanks for bringing that up, because I do know, I know that's been a big perf problem in the past, and we had been debating turning it off for that reason, but I don't think that we'll have to now.
Yeah, the related discussions were if there's native API extensions or X could use to get this information so they don't have to defer it. Because also in Firefox, for example, we have some more advanced color contrast heuristics that can also take into consideration gradients and images in the background, which from Axe you couldn't do. So
yeah, currently it doesn't cover those scenarios if I recall correctly.
So is part of the question here to figure out whether to like make a message field or like an info, like add an info property to something versus like having it just always be surfaced?
Yeah, let me pop up. Let's see, I'm not going to hit, I don't think I'm going to hit any accessibility issues here, but yeah. I will pick on Stack Overflow because I was testing them the other day. In fact, I think I might still have that one open. Okay. So yeah, the idea, kind of the question is whether we add that information, additional information like to this message, or whether it's some separate experience. I mean, the message here is relatively short. The additional information would make it more unique because it would vary depending on each piece. I don't know. It may be something we have to try out and see how it looks, because I don't know exactly what additional information we're going to get for every different kind of Axe rule. And that's why I was sort of raising the question of, well, maybe we might have to think about styling this differently. We could certainly take the approach, and I'm willing to, is to put together a PR, try just making it an addendum to the existing message, and then we can see if that ends up looking reasonable or not and go from there. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so in that case where having that additional information doesn't make sense, it just would not exist, right? And it's fairly easy to just do it sort of ad hoc as needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me.
Okay. So I'm going to bring this particular one into the backlog, and I'm going to make a note to just appending this to the current error report message.
It seems to me like the only reason we might want to split them out is if there was like a performance issue where we wanted the user to be able to disable it.
Yeah. I was more concerned about just more of a wall of text experience where if it ends up being too much information, which I think it's hard to judge until we see it.
Yeah.
Because it's already there in the report we have. So like there's no additional tests, anything that has to be run. All the cost has been paid, so to speak. Okay, so then this is the one that I know we've got someone working on already. Oh, I forgot to move this into the milestone. So this is being worked on by Jaspreet. And apparently it's not going to let me pick him at the moment. All right, we'll fix that later. I'll at least move it to in progress. All right. So for the VS Code extension, another piece that we've been talking about off and on is the annoying prompt that we have at the moment and how we can throttle that. This may be the right sprint to take care of it. So I was thinking if we get a couple other VS Code extension updates in, then we can hold off and release the new version at the end of this sprint and just kind of fix a series of those together. But I know this is one that's come up from a number of people that it's like, okay, that if I open a new project that doesn't have Webhint installed, I don't want to keep getting notified about it every single time. So I'm move that one into the backlog. Let's see. Otherwise, there's a few other interesting little bugs. This was something David and I came across. This is actually an interesting one to discuss. We came across this past sprint. Right now, our CLI experience, even though it can support taking either a URL or a file system path, our default configuration does not work with a file system path. You actually have to know which connector or which configuration to switch it to before you can successfully pass it a file system path and have it work. And so the only out-of-the-box experience that analyzes local files today is the VS Code extension. However, we have a configuration and pieces that are perfectly capable of working with this if we added a little bit of logic to kind of look at are we being passed a URL, or are we being passed a file system path, and then choose a different default configuration for when none has been specified based upon that? Was kind of the proposal here, so that we could make this scenario work. I don't know if this is a super common way that people are trying to use the CLI or not. It's certainly the only way if we talk about using it in a CI system. Like, if you're not going to stand up a web server in your CI, then you're going to need to run it in this way. And so that's sort of the piece where I think that makes it a little more interesting, given how much talk we've done lately about CI system integration, is if people want to run this against their source code files in CI, then they're going to need a configuration that works with it. And it'd be nice if the default one did. So what do you think, Rachel?
Yeah, I totally understand the justification for that. I would say, like, if we have, it feels like there's quite a bit of stuff that's gotten moved into the backlog. The fact that we're not quite ready to roll out anything with CI makes me feel like, if I had to pick, I would say, let's figure out what we're going to do with the CI stuff. But if I don't know, that's just my guess. I'm maybe being a little cautious about how many things are in the backlog right now.
Yeah, well, I guess the piece I'd add to that too is we've been okay overloading the backlog just a little bit. So like, we'd rather take the approach where we had more things under the same umbrella kind of scheduled than we could get to, than finish up all the things that we had laid out for the sprint and then be pulling randomly from the pool of everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm okay stretching us a little bit if we feel it fits with some of the other areas we're looking at.
Yeah, it definitely seems to make sense with the CI stuff.
Okay. All right, and then there's other stuff here, probably not for this sprint, but there's some infrastructure stuff I know David and I have talked about for doing sometime in the near future, where today our documentation on the website is actually published from our Git repo, which means it can be a bit ahead of what we've actually released. We'd like to change that to pull from the NPM packages. And there's a couple different dependencies that have to kind of update to make that happen. One of which is our release script doesn't currently publish a package that had docs only changes. So we have to actually make sure that if we only change the docs related to a given package, that we publish that to NPM so that we can use that when generating our docs for the website. Given this brings together a few different things, and as Rachel, you'd commented, we're already pulling a few things into the sprint, kind of a different theme. It's probably one that I don't think we'd bring into this sprint, but it's one that we should think about doing sometime in the near future. Is there anything else that's top of mind for anyone else on the call? Okay. Well, and I think it looks like we lost Utsav, but I think that there's a couple things still related to the serverless work that we're definitely going to be doing.
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still there. Okay,
Yeah.
It just overflowed you on my screen. So I imagine we've got another task or two related to serverless for this sprint. Now, it feels like we're getting pretty close. We might even be able to wrap up and start deploying some of these pieces to production after this next sprint. I doubt during the next sprint, but maybe after.
Yep, that's the hope. And I was even thinking, once we have everything in staging and working, maybe we can do sort of especially in the website, like try, if a scan happens, try running it in staging. And if it ever throws or something, we log that. And then as a fallback, go back to production before swapping it. Does that make sense?
Okay. So we try to detect the failure?
Well, try to do the scan in the staging setup before like actually swapping everything to production. So in the production website, right? or whatever used them. And then if we see that the scan didn't happen or the scan failed, then we can retry it again in the actual current production setup so that we can gather some exceptions that may happen that we haven't got.
Okay, so you just mean it's like a manual test.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would make sense. David, what do you think? Do we lose David?
Yeah, but I think we need to change the pipeline flow because we are publishing to staging and making a test and swapping to production. So
okay,
we need to be careful with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Just to keep the things on staging.
All right. Well, Utsav, I'll ask you to go ahead and create the tasks that you think that we have for this sprint around those tests, so that we have that tracked, and then I'll help us fill in estimates later and kind of split out a few of these other issues we were talking about. But I think that gives us enough to look at, especially leaving room for any other items that come up that we may want to prioritize.
Yeah, I mean, I've deliberately left the task open, like it's a generic task that says deploy to staging and test it out kind of thing, because I'm expecting, we'll have some issues, and we've never really had like the VNet lockdown and stuff kind of tested too, so that it's not accessible from anywhere outside the network. So that kind of stuff, getting it deployed, stress testing it with a bunch of URLs, I'm sure I'll have some tasks that will pop up as a result of that.
Okay. And I assume this is the one you were referring to?
Yeah. So
okay.
I may, as I see like tasks pop up, I may split that into multiple ones. That's what I was saying.
Okay, I just bumped it forward to the next milestone for the time being, and then you can split that up as needed.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. Looks like we're at time. So, and I think we've covered everything we need to cover today. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here. And Mike, it's very nice to meet you. Look forward to working with you more in the future.
Yep, likewise, and have a good day.
Yeah, have a good one. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.